I'll tell you a little bit about this show. It is a surreal ride, kind of a wild ride that tracks one man's journey overnight, actually, where he dreams about a lot of things en route to taking his U.S. citizenship exam. So he arrives on the road and to his journey at the offices of two Mormons, Brother Clark and Elder Lewis, who are references also to Lewis and Clark, whom he also meets later on in his dream. He is, to say he is stressed and anxious is to say the very least about him. He's played by Sharon San Jose, who is the head of Campo Santo, which is the resident theater of Intersection for the Arts. And anyone who has ever seen Sharon San Jose act, he is probably one of the best actors in this country. And he has never, ever said yes to me to do a play at Cal Shakes until I gave him this story to tell. When he falls asleep, he wakes up, and the first dream he has is the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which is where the Mexicans pretty much signed over most of America that they had to the Americans during the Spanish Civil War. And then it goes from there to Border Patrol, and then it goes to Teddy Roosevelt, and then we go to West Texas, where we learn about the Spanish flu and an amazing woman who's barely written in American history named Viola Pettis, an African-American woman who was the Florence Nightingale of the Spanish flu, which, by the way, didn't come from Spain. I think it was communicated first in Spanish through the Spanish newspaper, which is why it was named the Spanish flu. Information. This play is filled with correcting information about the U.S. history, which I am stunned by every day, but it takes everybody on. It takes the U.S. government on, it takes the Mexican government on. Every stereotype is thrown out there so that we can break through stereotypes and see people more clearly. The contradictions at the end of the play, being America being the dreamland and also a place with enormous numbers of problems, is both of those are true. And the song at the end celebrates the full entirety of America inside of it. It is a history play, the first history play that really relates to American history at Cal Shakes, as opposed to doing a play, one of Shakespeare's brilliant history plays, and pretending that the two sides are actually Iraq and the U.S., which they never really are in those plays, especially when somebody says Lord Buckingham. And then he shows up in an Iraqi costume, you're thinking, I get that.
And I think if people don't, like, not everybody may know who Emmett Till is, but they'll find out, or they'll be so interested they'll want to find out more. I mean, there's so much interesting stuff. You know, the one that I didn't know about, Ralph Lazo, the Mexican-Irish-American kid who chose to go to Manzanar because he wanted to be with his high school friends. And he was there, he graduated, and he became an activist.
The show was written and has always been performed with an extraordinary amount of projections, video projections. So where you are, and this goes to sort of your question of like, where am I at any given time, how do we follow the story, was all done with a lot of video. Tons and tons of video. We don't have it. We don't at all. And so I said, this thing is going to be about actors telling the story. The production that Richie was in, which was a Yale Rep, which was the last production.
We had tons of projections. When we were Lewis and Clark, there was the Rocky Mountains and snowing and all this stuff. And, all this extra. It was a lot of icing on the cake that Richard appreciated and was able to he loves to explore. So he loved to sort of see it. But then I feel like with this production here, our production here is that we've crystallized it because it is about the human struggle. Yeah. And so all the special effects stuff, if you want to make the movie version, great. But it is a theater piece, and it is about the human struggle.
Exactly. And in our production, when Lewis and Clark come on, one of the stagehands has a snow sifter.
The show is an Alice in Wonderland odyssey. There is a sense of you know, he meets Lewis and Clark, Juan Jose meets Lewis and Clark, and I always think of Tweedledee and Tweedledum
And Sacagawea.
Oh, and Sacagawea. And the way Richard's written Sacagawea, being 15 years old, is that she's still wearing her headgear. So she's
a list.
She's got a list. She talks a little bit like this,
Yeah.
and she's constantly teaching, you know, Lewis and Clark where they're going. Lewis and Clark take all the
Take all the credit.
They find a map. You know, Juan Jose shows them a map, and it's like a 30-foot Google map, and they're going to open the map, and they're going, oh my God! It goes Meriwether Lewis State Park, and then you say
Grant National Forest. Ha.
and he goes, I want a forest. And then she says, well, there's nothing for Sacagawea. And he just goes down the road and he goes, oh, look, there's Squaw Valley over there. Yeah, that's what it's going to be like. That's what I'm talking about, right? Right? And then they go off, and then there's this moment where the two of them are talking, he and Sacagawea, and he says, I can't believe I'm on this, I'm with you. And she says, I'm here, but you're actually just in a spirit dream. And he says, well, I hope your people treat you well. And she said, why wouldn't they? And he doesn't answer, why wouldn't they? And he says, some say that you were a traitor. And that, like, Malinche
With Cortez,
With Cortez.
the woman who helped Cortez.
and she's completely upset by the fact that history is going to remember her wrong. And so he rewrites history for her. He writes what his history is going to be for her. And he does that several times in the play. He starts to tell the story of people correctly about what they did. Because even inside of marginalized communities, people like someone like a Sacagawea is considered, she was considered a sellout. And yet the story is far, far more complex than that. And that happens over and over and over in the play. And then once it gets serious right there, that moment is quite beautiful. And then she sort of disappears, and as she goes off, a bear comes on, because they're in the wilderness, to kill Juan Jose, and Teddy Roosevelt shoots him. And then it's 45 seconds of Richie Ruiz as Teddy Roosevelt. Just shooting anything that he finds. Very funny. Please.
I had 16 costume changes. Oh. This is the last one. It's like one zipper. We like to have one zipper off the front or off the back.
Half of the costumes are just one big costume, you
Step
zip
in,
up the back.
pull it up, zip it up. Yeah.
And then a wig gets thrown on you, and you push out.
I'll be out of breath for a lot. It won't be acting, you know. Something that happens right before when places is called for a show like this. No intermission, so there's no turning back. You know, it's the Rock of Sisyphus. You know, here we go. You know, by the end, it's one of these weird plays that are written so well that you actually feel the relief and the exaltation that the characters feel. You know, some of the best plays, you don't have to actually act. If they're written well enough, you physically experience the journey, and then the words just come out naturally. You know, and this definitely has that, you know, feel to it.
What is the takeaway at the end of the play?
The takeaway is that you see this amazing celebration of every aspect of what it means to be an American from this entire spectrum, of the genuinely patriotic to the genuinely exclusionary, to the inclusive, to the left, to the right. So the takeaway is the world of America is complex and big, and every side is coming into it. And he thinks that by doing that, then the response on the audience's part, or maybe as citizens who have witnessed this play, is to having more complex conversations about the issues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because of all the complexities he put out there, and not one of them has been taken off the table and said that does not matter. So even when there's a scene where the Ku Klux Klan member in 1918 comes on and his child is sick with the flu, and the African American takes care of him, and it's not like they don't come together and hug. There's no sentimental moment, but both exist. And I think the idea that both exist isn't so much to say it's all good, even the bad things are good. It doesn't say that. We know, again, how we feel about certain issues in this world that are perhaps discriminatory beyond acceptance, to varying degrees for any of us. But I think the takeaway is that we can have a more complex conversation that might induce more compassion in the conversation.